I moved into what I thought was a pretty nice apartment complex about a year ago. Nothing super fancy, but it has all the amenities I wanted: covered parking, in-unit laundry, and most importantly, a decent-sized pool area with a hot tub. I work from home as a software developer, so having a place to decompress after staring at code all day is important to me. The pool area at our complex is honestly one of the main reasons I chose this place. It's got a large main pool, a smaller hot tub section, about 20 lounge chairs, for cabanas with curtains for privacy, and a small wet bar area where you can make your own drinks, no alcohol provided, but you can bring your own. There's also a grill area adjacent to the pool where residents can have cookouts. It's all enclosed by a black metal fence with key fob access, pretty standard security setup. For the first 8 months, pool life was peaceful. There's an unspoken rule about giving people space, and most residents are considerate. We're a mixed community: families, young professionals, retirees, and everyone generally got along. Then Barbara moved in. I first encountered Barbara on a Thursday afternoon in June. I had taken a half day off work because I had been grinding on a particularly nasty bug for days and needed a mental break. The pool was practically empty, just me and an elderly couple in the far corner reading books. I was floating on one of those inflatable loungers, eyes closed, halfway to a nap, when I heard someone clearing their throat very loudly next to me. I opened my eyes to see a woman probably in her mid-50s, with a blonde angled bob haircut, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and holding a designer beach bag. "Excuse me," she said in a particularly sharp tone. "Shouldn't you be at work?" I was so caught off guard that I actually laughed, thinking she was joking. She was not. "I'm sorry," I replied, sitting up on my float. "It's the middle of a workday. The pool should be available for those who actually have the time to use it properly. Like retirees and mothers with children." She gestured vaguely to the nearly empty pool area. "I work from home? And took the afternoon off?" I wasn't sure why I was explaining myself to a complete stranger. She made this sort of HMMMPH noise and then said, "Well, I'm part of the Community Standards Committee, and we're implementing new pool usage guidelines." This was the first red flag. I'd read all the HOA documents when I moved in, and there was definitely no Community Standards Committee. Our complex has a property management company and a small HOA board that meets quarterly. That's it. "I don't think we have a committee like that," I said carefully. "Did the management company start one recently?" Her eyes narrowed. "We're a resident-organized initiative to improve living standards here. We've noticed a lot of inappropriate pool usage lately." Now, I'm a pretty conflict-averse person, but something about the way she was trying to intimidate me really got under my skin. "Well, I pay the same HOA fees as everyone else, and there's nothing in the community guidelines about pool hours being restricted based on employment status," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "So unless management has issued new rules, I think I'll continue my float." Barbara's face flushed red. "We'll see about that," she snapped, then stormed over to the elderly couple and started talking to them in hushed tones while shooting glances at me. I figured this was just a one-off weird encounter with a busybody. I was wrong. So very wrong. The escalation. Over the next 2 weeks, Barbara seemed to be at the pool every single time I went down there. It didn't matter if it was a weekday, evening, or weekend. And each time, she had some new complaint. My music was too loud, I was using earbuds. My swimwear was inappropriate, standard men's swim trunks. I was taking up too much space, on a single lounge chair. I had too many guests, my one girlfriend. But the real issue began when she started carding people. Barbara took it upon herself to demand proof of residency from anyone who entered the pool area. She bought a clipboard and would station herself near the gate, interrogating people as they entered. "Excuse me, what unit are you in? I'll need to see your key fob and ID." Most people were so taken aback they'd actually comply before realizing this random woman had no authority whatsoever. The first time she tried this with me, I flat out refused. "Barbara, you're not security, you're not management, and you have no right to demand my ID. It's for safety," she insisted. "We've had reports of non-residents using our facilities." As head of the pool committee. "There is no pool committee," I interrupted. "You made that up. And if you're concerned about security, call the actual security company the complex employs." This set off what I can only describe as a tantrum. She accused me of being disrespectful, threatening, and ruining the community atmosphere. She also started taking photos of me, for documentation, which felt extremely invasive. At this point, I decided to email our property manager, David. I detailed Barbara's behavior and asked if there was indeed any kind of resident committee with authority over the pool. As expected, he confirmed there was not, and said he'd look into the situation. I thought that would be the end of it. It was not the end of it. The following weekend, I invited a few friends over for a small pool gathering. There were 6 of us total, well within the guest limit of 4 guests per resident, and we were being mindful of noise and space. 2 of my friends are black, and 1 is Asian. This detail becomes relevant. We had been there maybe 30 minutes when Barbara showed up, but this time, she had reinforcements, 2 other women around her age who had the same energy. They positioned themselves at a table near us and began loudly discussing how the neighborhood was changing and how certain people don't understand pool etiquette. When one of my friends went to use the restroom, Barbara intercepted him and demanded to know which unit he was a guest of. My friend, confused, pointed toward me. Barbara then came marching over. "Excuse me, but you're exceeding the guest limit," she declared. "No, I'm not," I replied. "The limit is 4 guests per resident, and I have 4 guests." "No," she said, pulling out a laminated piece of paper. "The new guidelines limit guests to 2 per resident on weekends." I asked to see this paper. It had the complex logo, clearly copy/pasted from the website, and a list of updated pool rules that were absolutely not the official rules. It even had a fake signature from management at the bottom. "Barbara, this is fake. You made this up," I said, trying to keep my voice level despite my rising anger. "How dare you," she gasped. "This was approved by the committee and management last week." "What committee? There is no committee." I was starting to lose my cool. I literally emailed David 3 days ago, and he confirmed there's no resident committee with any authority over the pool. This seemed to catch her off guard, but only for a moment before she regrouped. "David is only the assistant manager. Janice approved these rules. There is no Janice at our management company." At this point, my friends were feeling uncomfortable, which was exactly what Barbara wanted. One of them suggested we just go back to my apartment. As we were gathering our things, I overheard Barbara telling her friends loud enough for us to hear, "This is why we need stricter guest policies. These people invite all their friends from who knows where." That was it. I'd had enough. I turned around and said clearly, "Barbara, just say what you really mean. You don't want people who look different from you at the pool. But guess what? They live here too. They pay the same rent, the same HOA fees, and have every right to be here. And your fake committee with your fake rules isn't going to change that." Her face went through about 15 different expressions in 5 seconds. Her friends looked mortified that I had called them out so directly. Barbara spluttered something about respecting elders and community standards before grabbing her stuff and storming off, her posse trailing behind her. I immediately went back to my apartment and sent another email to management, this time with photos of Barbara's fake rulebook and details about her confronting my guests. I also mentioned the discriminatory undertones of her behavior. Management gets involved. The next morning, I received a call from David, the property manager. He sounded legitimately concerned and asked if I could meet him at the leasing office to discuss the situation further. When I arrived, David was there along with Lisa, the actual property manager, still no Janice. They apologized profusely for the situation and confirmed they had received several other complaints about Barbara over the past month. Apparently, she had been harassing the maintenance staff, demanding preferential treatment for repairs, and had even tried to fine a family for having a birthday party in the community room that she claimed she had reserved. She hadn't. Lisa explained that they had already issued Barbara a formal warning about misrepresenting herself as part of management or having any kind of authority. They asked me to document any further incidents and said they would be sending out a complex-wide email clarifying that there was no resident committee with authority over amenities. All official rules were in the lease agreement and on the official website. Any changes would come directly from the management office on official letterhead. Residents should report anyone impersonating management staff immediately. I felt relieved that they were taking it seriously, but also worried about potential retaliation from Barbara. I wasn't wrong. For about a week, things were quiet. Too quiet. I went to the pool a few times and there was no sign of Barbara. I started to think maybe management's warning had done the trick. Then my car got keyed. I have no proof it was Barbara, but the timing was suspicious. My assigned parking spot is visible from her unit. I figured out which one it was from seeing her come and go. The scratch wasn't deep, but it ran the length of the driver's side. The same day, I received an anonymous note under my door that read, "Troublemakers don't last long here. Watch your step." I reported both incidents to management and filed a police report for the car damage, though I knew without video evidence, nothing would likely come of it. Lisa from management was sympathetic and said they would review security footage, but our complex only has cameras at the entrances and amenity areas, not in the parking lots. The next time I went to the pool, Barbara was there, looking smug. She didn't approach me, but kept giving me these little satisfied smiles. I refused to let her think she'd won, so I set up my spot, put on my earbuds, and acted like she didn't exist. About 20 minutes later, a young family arrived, a mom, dad, and 2 kids around 5 to 7 years old. The family was Latino, and immediately Barbara went into action, approaching them with her clipboard. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see the parents looking confused and uncomfortable as Barbara gestured emphatically. I took out my earbuds and walked over. "Hi there," I said to the family. "Are you new to the complex?" "I'm in Building 3. The father nodded. "Yes, we just moved in last week." "Building 4. I smiled and then turned to Barbara. "They don't need to show you ID, Barbara. They live here, and you know you have no authority to ask for that." The mother looked relieved and gave me a grateful glance. Barbara turned bright red. "I was just trying to introduce myself and explain the pool rules to new residents," she said defensively. "With your clipboard of fake rules?" I pointed out. "Management already confirmed those aren't real." Barbara huffed. "Fine. But when outsiders start breaking into the pool because no one's checking IDs, don't come crying to me." She gathered her things and left, throwing one last glare over her shoulder. The family thanked me, and we chatted briefly. They had indeed been asked for ID and unit numbers, and Barbara had told them that, for security reasons, they were limiting pool access for new residents to certain hours. Complete fiction. I gave them my number and suggested they contact management if she bothered them again. The dad, Miguel, worked in security himself and was pretty angry about the impersonation aspect. After that incident, something interesting began to happen. I started noticing more residents at the pool than before, particularly residents of color who said they'd been avoiding it because of Barbara's harassment. Word had spread about management's email, and people were reclaiming the space. I met more of my neighbors in 2 weeks than I had in the previous year. We started a group chat for pool gatherings, and one resident who works as a lawyer offered free advice to anyone experiencing harassment. Another resident who served on the actual HOA board, not Barbara's fictional committee, joined our chat and kept us updated on official business. Meanwhile, Barbara seemed to be losing allies. Her 2 sidekicks stopped showing up with her, and she would sit alone, glaring at everyone enjoying themselves. She tried approaching a few more people for ID checks, but now people knew to refuse. A few would loudly announce, "Barbara is not management and has no authority here," whenever she started her routine, which would send her storming off. The complex felt like a community again. We had a resident-organized potluck by the pool, with actual permission from management, and nearly 50 people showed up. Barbara watched from her balcony but didn't come down. I thought we'd reached a stalemate that I could live with. But Barbara had one last play. Labor Day weekend. The unofficial end of summer. Our complex was holding an official pool party with catered food, games for kids, and even a small inflatable water slide. Management sent formal invitations to all residents, and the turnout was huge. I was helping set up some of the food tables when I saw Barbara arrive. She was dressed like she was attending a formal garden party, complete with a wide-brimmed hat and sundress. But what caught my attention was that she was talking to a man in a suit who was decidedly overdressed for a pool party. They made their way over to Lisa, the property manager, and I saw Barbara animatedly talking and pointing around the pool area, occasionally gesturing toward me and some of the other residents who had stood up to her. The man in the suit was taking notes. I casually moved closer, pretending to rearrange some cups, and caught snippets of the conversation. Violation of health codes. Unauthorized committee that's creating a hostile environment. Threatened me multiple times. My blood ran cold when I realized what was happening. Barbara had brought a lawyer. She was trying to sue the complex or get residents evicted. Lisa looked increasingly uncomfortable but maintained her professional composure. She eventually escorted Barbara and the suit man to the office, away from the party. The celebration continued, but I was on edge. Had Barbara actually found some legal loophole? Was I going to be hit with a lawsuit for standing up to her? About an hour later, Lisa returned to the party alone. She caught my eye and gave me a subtle thumbs up, which was reassuring but mysterious. It wasn't until the next day that I found out what happened. Lisa called me and said she wanted to update me since I'd been so involved in the Barbara situation. Apparently, the man in the suit wasn't a lawyer at all. He was Barbara's brother, who worked as a paralegal and was just there to intimidate management. Barbara had presented a list of demands, including the establishment of an official resident safety committee with her as the chair, authority to approve or deny pool access, the eviction of problem residents, including me, who had harassed her, a dedicated parking space closer to her unit, a reduction in her rent for her volunteer security work. Lisa had listened politely and then dropped several bombs. They had extensive documentation of Barbara's harassment of multiple residents. Impersonating property management is grounds for lease termination. The fake fines she had attempted to collect from residents could constitute fraud. The complex had a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. They had security footage of her putting notes under doors, including mine. Lisa gave Barbara two options: sign a behavioral agreement and cease all harassment immediately, or face eviction proceedings. Barbara apparently had a complete meltdown in the office, screaming about how she was just trying to maintain standards and how the complex was going downhill. Her brother had to physically escort her out. It's been a month since the Labor Day showdown, and things have taken several interesting turns. First, Barbara signed the behavioral agreement rather than face eviction. For about 2 weeks, she was a ghost. I didn't see her at the pool or anywhere in the complex. I figured she was just lying low, but then I noticed moving trucks at her building. Barbara wasn't evicted, she chose to leave. According to her next-door neighbor, Barbara couldn't handle the social humiliation of everyone knowing she had been reprimanded. She apparently found a more exclusive community across town that maintains proper standards. After Barbara left, Lisa from management invited me to join the actual resident advisory board, which is basically a liaison between residents and management, but with absolutely zero enforcement power. It's more of a suggestion and feedback panel to improve community living. Our first order of business? Revamping the actual pool rules to be more inclusive and clear. We implemented a simple sign-in sheet, completely voluntary and anonymous, just to track usage patterns so management could better schedule maintenance and cleaning. We also organized a rotation of resident volunteers to help keep the area tidy, no ID checking or harassment involved. The community atmosphere has completely transformed. People who never used the pool before are regular fixtures now. We started Friday evening socials where people bring snacks to share. Kids who were previously supervised with hawk-like intensity by nervous parents, thanks to Barbara's reign of terror, now play freely while multiple community members keep an eye out. I've learned the names of more neighbors in the past month than in my entire year of living here. Miguel, the security professional Barbara harassed with his family, and I have become good friends, and his wife makes the most amazing empanadas for our community gatherings. One of Barbara's former friends, Janet, approached me at a community gathering to apologize. She explained that Barbara had basically bullied them into supporting her by threatening to report supposed violations of their leases to management. Once Barbara's powerlessness was exposed, Janet felt free to come to the pool again and is now one of our most enthusiastic community members. The complex also installed additional security cameras in the parking areas after my car keying incident, and while they can't prove it was Barbara, they're taking property damage much more seriously. Update: 3 months later. Barbara is back. Not as a resident, thankfully, but she's been spotted multiple times trying to use our pool as a guest of someone. About a week ago, I was doing my usual weekend swim when I spotted a familiar blonde bob and oversized sunglasses trying to be inconspicuous in one of the cabanas. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. Surely Barbara wouldn't have the audacity to return to the scene of her crimes. But no, it was definitely her. She was with an older gentleman who actually does live in the complex, Mr. Peterson from Building 7. He's a widower in his 70s who keeps to himself mostly. Apparently, Barbara had struck up a friendship with him before all the drama and had convinced him to sign her in as a guest. Now, our complex does allow guests, but there's a limit to how often the same guest can use the facilities, no more than twice a week. Given Barbara's history, several residents, myself included, notified management immediately. Lisa from management approached them and very professionally reminded Mr. Peterson about the guest policy. Barbara pretended not to recognize Lisa and introduced herself with a different name. She was calling herself Brenda now. Lisa simply said, "Ms. Barbara's last name, we have you on file as a previous resident who moved out in September. Our policy doesn't allow former residents to return as guests within 6 months of ending their lease." Barbara turned bright red, made some excuse about the sun being too hot anyway, and left. Mr. Peterson looked confused and a bit embarrassed. We later learned that Barbara had told him she had never lived at our complex before but was considering moving in and wanted to try out the amenities. But it doesn't end there. 3 days later, security caught Barbara trying to use her old key fob to get into the pool area. Apparently, she had forgotten to return it when she moved out. When confronted, she claimed she had just found it in her purse and was returning it to the office. At 7:30 p.m. When the office was closed. While wearing a swimsuit under her cover-up. Management has since deactivated her fob, sent her a formal trespassing warning, and communicated to all residents that Barbara is not permitted on the property. They also implemented a new sign-in system for guests that requires a photo ID. The whole situation has become something of a community joke now. At our last resident board meeting, someone suggested we create a Pool Rules Hall of Fame with cartoon illustrations of do's and don'ts. The first rule, illustrated with a character that looked suspiciously like Barbara, but just different enough to avoid any legal issues, stated, "No self-appointed pool police." We've also established an actual pool etiquette guideline, created by and voted on by residents, that emphasizes inclusion, respect, and the understanding that no resident has authority over another. In the strangest twist, the community has never been stronger. Barbara's reign of terror and subsequent fall from power has united residents across all demographics. We now have monthly community events, a thriving group chat, and genuine friendships that would never have formed otherwise. The last I heard, Barbara has been trying to join the HOA board at her new complex. God help them.